Quantumscape, they've been one of the most watched companies out there, all racing to build a much better battery. Well, their brand new shareholder letter just dropped, and it gives us this rare look under the hood. It details what they're calling a landmark year of progress, and, maybe more importantly, it lays out their entire blueprint for what's coming next. So let's dive in and break it all down. Okay, before we get into the good stuff, just a quick but really important heads up. This is purely for educational purposes, so please don't take any of this as financial advice. Everything we're about to talk about comes straight from the source, Quantumscape's latest letter to its shareholders. So let's just start with the big what if. What if your EV could charge up in the time it takes to grab a coffee? Minutes, not hours. And what if that same car could go hundreds of extra miles on a single charge? Well, that's not just some sci-fi dream. It is the fundamental promise behind the technology we're digging into today.
And at the very heart of that promise is the solid-state battery. You see, the lithium-ion batteries in your phone, in your laptop, they use a flammable liquid to move energy around. A solid-state battery, well, it gets rid of that liquid and replaces it with a solid piece of ceramic. Now that sounds simple, but trust me, engineering it is incredibly difficult. But if they can pull it off, it could unlock that holy grail. More power, way faster charging, and much better safety.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look back at what the company is calling a landmark year. Then we're going to meet the Eagle Line. This is their crucial new pilot factory. After that, we'll unpack their really ambitious roadmap for the year ahead. And finally, we'll take a look at the money that's funding this whole operation. All right, let's kick things off with their review of 2025. In their own words, it was a landmark year. A year where they apparently hit every single major target they set for themselves. So the big question is, what did they actually accomplish?
They laid out this 4-step plan for the year, and according to the letter, they nailed every single one. It all started with perfecting a new manufacturing process they call Cobra. That process allowed them to ship their first prototype cells. From there, they installed the equipment for that brand new pilot production line we mentioned, all while signing up more commercial partners along the way. So you might be asking, what in the world is this Cobra process? Well, it's their answer to one of the biggest challenges with solid-state batteries. How do you make that super thin, kind of fragile ceramic separator, but do it quickly and reliably? Cobra is the manufacturing technique they believe is the key to finally getting out of the lab and into mass production.
And on the business side of things, they locked in some pretty serious partners. They deepened their ties with Volkswagen, they signed on 2 more major global automakers, and they brought in some real ceramics experts, Murata and Corning. But honestly, the biggest milestone might be this. After shipping those first prototype cells, they actually build a customer for the very first time. It's a small step for sure, but it signals that first real shift from being a pure research company to a commercial one.
And here's a perfect example of that move from the lab into the real world. Back in September, their battery tech was actually powering a Ducati electric race bike on stage at a huge mobility show in Munich. It was the very first time the public got to see their technology inside a vehicle you could actually, touch. So all that progress, the Cobra process, those first shipments, the new partners, it was all building towards this one thing. This is probably the single most important development in the entire letter, the Eagle Line. Think of it as their bridge, the thing that takes them from being a research lab to becoming a real manufacturer. And here it is. This is our first look at the actual equipment on that Eagle Line. The company calls it their blueprint for scalable production. And what that really means is it's a highly automated mini factory. It's designed to prove one critical thing, that these batteries can be built not just by hand in a lab, but efficiently and consistently by machines.
Now, what's so interesting is how they lay out the strategy here. The Eagle Line isn't just about making batteries, it actually has 3 jobs. First, it's got to produce sample cells for customers to test out. Second, it needs to prove the manufacturing process can be scaled up so that partners can license it. And third, it's going to be a testbed for developing future battery improvements. And listen, this isn't some far-off plan. It is happening right now. They officially cut the ribbon on the Eagle Line just a few weeks ago, on February 4th. For a company that's been in development for more than a decade, that is a truly huge moment. So with the Eagle Line now up and running, the question becomes, what's next? Well, the shareholder letter gives us a pretty clear and very ambitious roadmap for the year ahead. Their plan for this year is built on 4 main pillars. It all starts with proving the Eagle Line can actually work at scale. At the same time, they're going to be pushing your car company partnerships closer and closer to actual commercial deals.
Then they'll start looking at new markets beyond just cars, all while continuing to innovate the core battery technology itself. And when they say new markets, they are not kidding around. The letter specifically calls out huge opportunities in things like data centers, robotics, aviation, and even defense. All industries where having more power in a smaller, lighter package is absolutely critical. And to add a little bit of weight to those big ambitions, they highlighted the addition of Jeff Rebar to their board. Now, this guy is a tech industry veteran from places like NVIDIA and AMD, and his quote really frames the company not just as a battery maker, but as a key player in the whole future of energy storage. Of course, all that ambition costs money, a lot of money. So the final piece of this puzzle is the financial picture. Let's take a quick look at the numbers they reported. The most important number on their balance sheet is probably this one, liquidity. They ended the year with just over $970 million in the bank. For a company that isn't profitable yet, this is their lifeblood. It's the cash they'll use to fund that entire 2026 roadmap we just walked through. And here's that milestone we mentioned earlier. For the first time ever, they reported $19.5 million in customer billings. Now, let's be crystal clear, this is not revenue from selling a final product, it's payment for development work and samples. But it's a metric they're highlighting to show that real commercial activity, with actual money changing hands, has officially begun. Of course, developing this stuff costs a fortune. They reported an adjusted loss of about $252 million for the year. Now, the company is really quick to point out two things. First, that this number was right where they predicted it would be. And second, it's actually a 10% smaller loss than the year before. This is what you call the burn rate. It's the cost of trying to scale up. And they fully expect that spending to continue. For this year, they're forecasting a pretty similar loss, somewhere between $250 and $275 million. This is the planned investment they say is necessary to get that Eagle Line fully ramped up and to hit those ambitious goals they've set. So, to wrap it all up in a nutshell, the company reports that it hit all of its key targets for last year. Their new Eagle Line is now the absolute center of their universe, designed to prove their manufacturing can scale. The plan for this year is to deepen those auto partnerships while exploring new markets. And they have a big pile of cash, almost $1 billion, to fund those plans. So, the blueprint is out there. Quantumscape has officially moved from the lab to a pilot production line, and they've laid out a very clear, very ambitious path forward. The fundamental question is still the same. After more than a decade of development, after billions in investment, is this the technology that finally unlocks the next generation of energy? That's what the entire industry, and frankly the world, is waiting to find out.